wish I would have known about that technique 3-4 years ago, because I could have potentially absorbed twice as much information. Problem with the single speed after you get used to double speed is that you lose concentration, because you realize that your mind is capable of absorbing so much more and so much faster. And when you're listening on a single speed, it feels like a waste of time. Listening on double speed can increase your productivity tenfold. Speed listening. So I've been doing it for the last, 4 or 5 months, and I think that at this point I have a quite good understanding of pros and cons of listening, on a double speed.
So give us a number then, because I've been doing a bit of speed listening, but I think I'm a slower speed listener than you. Like, you were showing me numbers and you're like, what number are we talking here?
So general rule, with YouTube is 2 times
double speed.
Double speed, and not because I am not able to listen, on the faster speeds, because that's the limit, on mobile devices and everything. Well, there is additional software that you can use to speed it even further, but there's this adaptation curve. So when you start listening on the faster speed, initially it seems like exactly. Mm-hmm. So what you actually need to get to the point that you start feeling comfortable with it. So the way I've learned is that I've set the speed on a slightly higher level than I was able to comprehend what they're saying. And I've just continued listening. And I'll be honest, initially that was a disaster. Initially I was maybe extracting 20-30% of a content, of the meaning of the content, from what I've been listening to. But as I've progressed, as I use this technique on, absorbing both audiobooks and all the videos on YouTube and all the podcasts, your brain gets used to it so much that at this point, when I actually listen to something on the single speed, it seems like, come on, when they're going to get to the point. It's like the problem with the single speed after you get used to double speed is that you lose concentration, because you realize that your mind is capable of absorbing so much more and so much faster. And when you're listening on a single speed, it feels like a waste of time after a while. So it's absolutely fascinating, There are some downsides of doing a double speed reading or double speed media content viewing, and the problem is that you lose a bit of enjoyment. So when you listen on a single speed, and let's say you've got something really creative, you've got really nice music in the background, it kills the magic of it, it kills the engagement. So it's really, really good at extracting information and learning things, but not so much in terms of enjoying the content. But the funny thing is that before I started even, considering double speed reading, double speed listening, in my mind, I thought that it's going to be impossible to comprehend what people are saying. But the opposite is true. So I know it's difficult to believe for someone who've never experienced it and who've never tested it for long enough. But it feels like when somebody talks to you, when you consume the content on double speed, it's easier to add one thing to another, because these things just, you don't get time to allow your mind to wander. You have to be laser focused. And of course, it probably takes a little bit more of your resources. So after listening to something for hour and a half, you're pretty much done. There will be no point of you, trying to learn anything more on that day. And there's also, a different type of content that's easier to listen on double speed than other. So clearly, I wouldn't be listening to a book about quantum physics on a double speed, because probably even if I was to listen it on half a speed, I wouldn't be able to comprehend most things that they're talking about. So I guess that's one of the aspects that, the more familiar you are with the topic, easier it will be for you to consume the content on double or sometimes even triple speed.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I've been experimenting with it as well. I find, about 1.5 speed or 1.75. It depends. It depends who's speaking. It depends at what rate they speak at normally. But one of the interesting things I found is that pitch is a factor as well. So, like, usually when you speed people up, their pitches, it's like they're on helium. They get, and if you slow them down, then it gets deeper. But there's an app I was using, which I think is called Vantage, and it's like it's YouTube, but you don't get the adverts and different stuff. Anyway, with their speed up tool, you've got like a major control over the speed. So it's not like just 1.25, 1.5. You got control over that, but not just the speed, but also the pitch. So you can speed it up, but then take the pitch down, so it sounds more natural, but it's faster, which is really interesting.
Yeah, but I'll be honest, even with the YouTube double speed, the pitch doesn't really change that much. There is a little bit of a change, but in the past, any software that would, double speed any content, it would turn it into a chipmunk, basically. Which is not really the case with these new softwares. And yet another funny thing is that, after listening to someone, let's say Jordan Peterson, his lectures on the double speed, and if, for hours upon hours, then when you hear him speaking on the single speed, it seems weird, seems so strange.
Yeah, I can imagine that.
Yeah, and there are certain things that you can easily absorb on double speed, but sometimes you really want to slow it down.
Have you tried so another option, a lot of things, is to take out the silence. You seen that option?
No, I've never.
Have you not seen that? So it's on Audible, it's on a few different things. So it's just like it's on Podbean, the podcast.
Okay.
Is it on Audible? Maybe it's on Podbean. Maybe I'm getting confused there. I don't know if it's on Audible. Definitely on Podbean. So what it does is it cuts out all the silence and so puts all the bits together, so you just hear them speaking. So it speeds everything up, but they're not necessarily going any faster. It's just there's no breaks, and so that would come out as there's no breaks. But I don't like it. I don't like it because you get across a lot of feeling and different stuff with the breaks. I don't tend to use that one. I'm not so keen on it.
See, that's you would imagine that the feeling would disappear when you listen on double speed, but surprisingly, your brain adjusts, and you still get the same feelings that you would get, if you get a good narrator. So it's just faster.
And I think that's because the spaces are kept in. Whereas when you take the spaces out, it's not so much. Like, you can try that out yourself, but it changes. You lose some of that, I think, when you remove the silence.
So like I said, perhaps it would work for a certain type of content, but not necessarily for others. So if you have something that's, densely packed with information, at that point, it doesn't really matter whether or not you will have any feelings conveyed or not. Whereas if you listen to something like either poetry or philosophy, things like that, you do need these spaces because they're there for a reason. So that's definitely.
So what was that you just said? Like, if you were to categorize it, what you just said, into one of those categories, where would you place it? Because you used a lot of silence there. You used lots of spaces there. And that wasn't poetry, it wasn't philosophy. So
no, it wasn't. But
maybe it is philosophy. You're trying to work something out. And
it is and it isn't. But I'm thinking on my feet. That's the reason why I'm taking my time.
Mm-hmm. But
and sometimes it's used to emphasize, something.
It's another form of communication. So they say that a lot of the communication is body language. So in the same way, a lot of it is silence. Sting wrote a really interesting article for a music magazine, and what he said in it, what the takeaway I got from it was that creating music was all about framing the silence. That's what it was. That's what you're doing.
It's really
interesting.
And I
thought that's really. It always stuck with me. I thought that's a really cool way of putting it, and it made me look at music from a different angle. So yeah, I like the silences, so I'm not going to be cutting those out.
Silences definitely are important, but listening on double speed can increase your productivity tenfold. And right now, after listening for 4 or 5 months, 4 months maybe, I wish I would have known about that technique 3-4 years ago, because I could have potentially absorbed twice as much information.
Would you have retained twice as much information is a question.
Even if I wouldn't, I think that I'll be able to go through more content, and sometimes it's a matter of exposure to a different people talking about the same idea in order to allow you to understand the concept better. So it's not so much about a listening for a short period of time. It's being exposed to the same information being delivered, articulated by different people, because sometimes one person will have a better way of articulating something for your particular person.
Yeah.
So that's the benefit I can see. Not memorizing wise, but understanding wise, I think could be extremely beneficial.
I think, So here's my challenge or the pushback on that. I'll explain first of all how I see it, my concept, because that helps you to see if you join the dots and see if you think I'm right or not. So what I find with the speed reading or listening, is that it's really great for giving an overview. And so, as you say, if you get an overview of a subject from a bunch of different people, then you get perspective. And in terms of understanding, that's a really useful thing. However, another way of understanding, that's one way to gain understanding of a subject. Another way is to really meditate and contemplate and pick apart and analyze and repeat and repeat and repeat. That's another way to gain understanding. And sometimes the speed thing, it's just giving you surface. It's not really giving you some of that depth of understanding. It's my challenge with it. But you could do both of those things, and then that would be potentially useful. That's
the thing. What you could potentially do, if you think about double speed listening, you can actually listen to the same content twice, or sometimes even 4 times. If you listen to the content, on double speed 4 times, I'm quite sure that you will absorb way more every single time you listen than you would have if you would have listened, on single speed to begin with. This is just my hypothesis. Maybe it doesn't work like that with everyone.
It's a good hypothesis. I think the challenge for me personally, I don't. And it's one of my own flaws that when I have to look back, but if I've read so many books, I've watched so many movies, and I have a resistance to watching the same thing twice. I'm not keen. It's like, I've been there before. I don't want to do it again.
There are certain things that you're right. I wouldn't watch the same movie twice. Plus, I would never consider watching a movie on a double speed. Even if it's very good, yes, but you're not doing it in order to learn. And that's a big difference. So,
a movie's already double speed.
Yeah, I know, but what I mean here is
listening
to a book. So sometimes you listen to the book on a double speed, like Republic, for instance, and you realize that you missed a lot. You need to listen to that, second time on a double speed, but maybe not even on a double speed, like you said, 1.6. And the second time I've listened to the Republic, it feels like, I've been reading that book for the first time. But it's not because I've missed so much on the initial double speed read. It's because once you have time to have this, overview of what the book's about and, the ideas that are being, explored in the book, the second time when you listen, you actually start absorbing it in a different way, in a different manner. So that's the benefit, for me, of listening or reading the same content twice or sometimes 3 times, especially if you want to learn something, if you want to learn something with intention of teaching it to other people. Reading it once, it's not going to cut. You just need to fully immerse yourself in the information, and you need to be able to absorb it. And I'm finding that for me in particular, I sometimes need to listen to something 3, 4, 5 times before I really get the idea. And for many people, that's a waste of time. But not for me.
For me also, I really find it helpful to have an overview. And that's one of the things that speed listening could potentially give you, an overview without focus in a whole load of energy on something that you're going to discover, this is not really what I need to be looking at. This is not useful. So for the overview, but also so the other aspect of that is identification. So identifying what the right information is. And so it's really useful to be able to identify the right information and listen to that, because there's so much information out there, and you can't listen and contemplate it all. It's just
you can't.
too much.
No, absolutely.
And so the speed listening is potentially really useful for identifying where the right information is, and then you could go back, like you say, and spend more time in it. I think my personal challenge is I need to implement a bit more of that if they're going back, because I find that like this journey thing, I always want to go and explore the new places. I don't want to go and explore the places I've been before.
We're all the same that way.
I don't know if everybody's like that. I don't know. I think it's personal sort of.
It is.
There's pros and cons to it, but I think my challenge to myself is to really stick with something and go over it and over it and over it and over it.
That's the concept we've discussed. That's the concept we've discussed. This is exactly what we're going to do. We're going to focus on smaller number of books, but we're going to try to completely understand the ideas, and then being able to, articulate, properly the meaning behind these ideas, at least the meaning that we've extracted, throughout our reading or listening or whatever. So, yes, speed reading is definitely interesting, and I think it could be beneficial for other people to perhaps explore the idea of speed reading and do not get discouraged with difficulties with understanding, to begin with, because it does take time. And all it is practice. And after some time, you can really extract lots of benefits from it. That's the bottom line.